What if I told you the California gold rush, the one that defines the American dream of striking it rich, had almost nothing to do with making miners wealthy? It kind of goes against the whole story we've been told. We all picture that lone, grizzled prospector, pan in hand, pulling a fortune from a river. And sure, that happened for a handful of people. But it's a tiny footnote in a much bigger, crazier story. The real gold wasn't the metal. It was the creation of a whole new world. This is the story of how a little glint of something shiny in a remote sawmill didn't just make a few people rich. It built a state, remade a nation, and unleashed forces of greed, innovation, and destruction that we're still dealing with today. This was one of the biggest mass migrations in U.S. history, a chaotic, violent, and world-changing event that forever altered the face of America. Our story kicks off not with some grand plan, but with a pretty ordinary job. It's January 24th, 1848. A carpenter, James W. Marshall, is building a sawmill for his boss, John Sutter, a Swiss immigrant with huge ambitions. Sutter was trying to build his own personal empire in the Sacramento Valley, a place he called New Helvetia. He dreamed of a massive farming kingdom, a peaceful, thriving colony. The sawmill at Coloma was just one small piece of that dream. That morning, Marshall was checking the channel that carries water away from the mill's wheel when something shiny in the cold water caught his eye. He picked up a few small flakes. "It made my heart thump," he said later, "for I was certain it was gold." He raced back to Sutter, and behind closed doors, they ran some tests. No doubt about it, it was gold. But Sutter wasn't thrilled. He was terrified. He knew, instantly, that if this got out, his agricultural dream was toast. Who's going to farm your fields when they can dig for treasure? He made Marshall and his men swear to secrecy. But a secret this big is like trying to hold smoke in your hands. It's impossible. Word got out, first to nearby farms, then carried by sailors and merchants. The man who really lit the fuse was a San Francisco storekeeper named Samuel Brannan. He was the gold rush's first great promoter and its first real profiteer. After making sure the stories were true, he didn't just spread the news, he screamed it. He famously ran through the streets of what was then a tiny town, waving a bottle full of gold dust and shouting, "Gold, gold, gold," from the American River. Of course, Brannan had already cleverly bought every pickaxe, shovel, and pan he could get his hands on. He became California's first millionaire, not by mining gold, but by selling tools to the miners. The local rush was instant. By mid-June 1848, San Francisco was practically a ghost town. Something like 3/4 of the men had just dropped everything and headed for the hills. About 4,000 miners were already in the gold fields by August. But that was just a tremor. The earthquake hit on December 5th, 1848, when President James K. Polk himself confirmed the discovery in a speech to Congress. Once the President of the United States said it was real, gold fever went global. The floodgates were about to burst open. The president's announcement triggered one of the largest mass migrations in American history. An estimated 300,000 people, later nicknamed the 49ers, swarmed into California between 1848 and 1855. To put that in perspective, California's non-native population before the rush was only about 14,000. By 1852, it had exploded to over 220,000. San Francisco, a sleepy village of around 1,000 people in 1846, became a chaotic, muddy boomtown of over 30,000 by 1852. They came from everywhere. Americans from the East Coast sold their farms and gambled their life savings on the dream. Experienced miners came up from Mexico and Chile, farmers sailed from Europe, and thousands of immigrants arrived from China, drawn to what they called Gold Mountain. It was a global flood of people, all pouring into a land that was completely unprepared for them. Just getting there was the first test, and for many, it was a deadly one. You basically had three options, and all of them were brutal. Most Americans took the overland route, a grueling 2,000-mile wagon journey across prairies, deserts, and the massive Rocky and Sierra Nevada mountains. The trip took up to 6 months and was a constant battle against starvation, dehydration, and diseases like cholera, which killed thousands along the trail. Option 2 was the all-sea route, a 15,000-mile monster of a voyage around the tip of South America. That could also take half a year, with people packed into leaky ships suffering from bad food, rats, and mind-numbing boredom. The third, shortcut route was by sea to Panama. There, you'd trek 50 miles through a dense, disease-filled jungle to the Pacific, and then hopefully catch another ship heading north. It was faster, but tropical diseases like malaria picked off countless travelers. No matter how they got there, what they found was a shock. Many staggered into San Francisco sick and half-starved, only to find utter chaos. The harbor was a forest of masts from hundreds of abandoned ships. Their crews had all run off to the gold fields. Many of these ships were just left to rot, sunk, or run aground, and parts of modern San Francisco are literally built on top of them. For the 49ers, one journey had ended. But the real nightmare, life in the mines, was just about to begin. The dream that pulled all those people across the world was of easy wealth, of rivers paved with gold. The reality was a punch to the gut. Life in the gold fields was just back-breaking labor, soul-crushing loneliness, and the constant threat of failure and violence. In the very early days, some guys did get lucky with simple tools. Placer mining using a metal pan to swirl gravel and water until the heavy gold sinks to the bottom was how it started. Miners would stand for hours, hunched over in freezing river water, their hands raw. Some used rockers or sluice boxes to process more dirt. But that easy gold on the surface disappeared fast. By 1851, it was mostly gone. Getting to the rest of the gold meant hard rock mining, blasting and tunneling deep into the earth. That was dangerous, expensive work that a single person couldn't afford. It required organized companies with investors and heavy machinery. The iconic lone miner with his pan quickly became a thing of the past. For most, the dream died, and they ended up working for wages for the very companies they once hoped to become. The mining camps themselves were lawless, miserable places. With names like Hangtown and You Bet, they were often just dirty collections of tents and shacks. There was no sanitation, so diseases like dysentery spread like wildfire. Food was insanely expensive. A single egg could cost what a whole day of labor was worth back home. Life was a grim cycle of hard work, followed by nights of desperate gambling and drinking in smoky saloons. For the vast majority, the gold rush was a total bust. They blew their life savings and risked their lives for a dream that became a nightmare of debt, sickness, and mud. And the irony? The two men who started it all, John Sutter and James Marshall, both died broke. Their land was overrun by squatters. Their plans were ruined, and their discovery ended up being a curse, not a blessing. It turned out the real wealth of the gold rush wasn't for the people digging in the dirt. It was for the people selling them the shovels. The true legacy of the gold rush has almost nothing to do with the gold itself. It has everything to do with the world that was built on top of it. Dropping that many people and that much money into a remote territory was like hitting a fast-forward button on history, triggering huge changes that would define not just California, but the entire country. While most miners went broke, the people selling them stuff got rich. This is where legendary American companies were born. A German immigrant named Levi Strauss saw that miners needed tough pants, so he started making them out of canvas and later denim, and founded Levi Strauss and Company. Henry Wells and William Fargo started a banking and express company to serve the boom, an enterprise that became Wells Fargo. The gold itself, about $2 billion worth, was pumped into the U.S. economy, helping to fund the Industrial Revolution. And this new economic powerhouse on the West Coast needed to be connected to the rest of the country. This massively sped up the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was finished in 1869. The railroad then allowed California's other industries like agriculture to boom. By the 1860s, California's farms were already making more money than its gold mines, setting the stage for the powerhouse state we know today. The gold rush tore the landscape apart, leaving scars that are still visible today. The environmental damage was stunning. Early mining muddied the rivers, but the invention of hydraulic mining in the 1850s was devastation on an industrial scale. Miners used massive water cannons to literally blast away entire hillsides, washing millions of tons of gravel, mud, and debris into the rivers. This clogged waterways caused massive floods that wiped out farms downstream and reshaped the land itself. To make things worse, miners used huge amounts of mercury to separate the fine gold particles from the dirt. Much of this toxic heavy metal was washed straight into the river systems. That mercury is still there today, poisoning the water, the soil, and the fish, a toxic legacy of the rush for gold. It wasn't just a human tragedy. It was an ecological catastrophe. This story is a powerful reminder that history is never simple. The biggest events have hidden costs and consequences that ripple out for generations. If you want to keep exploring the complicated, messy, and fascinating stories that really shaped our world, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what we dig into next. So, what was the real impact of the gold rush? It was the violent, chaotic birth of modern California. It was an event that slammed the accelerator on America's westward expansion, bankrolled its industrial might, and forever changed who we are as a nation. It created a culture of risk-taking, of bold, relentless ambition that is baked into the identity of California and America itself. The American dream was forged in those gold fields. But that dream was built on a foundation of nightmares. It was built on the genocide of native peoples and the brutal exploitation of immigrants, creating racial conflicts that are still with us. It unleashed an era of environmental destruction from which the land has never fully recovered. The gold rush created incredible wealth, but it came at a staggering cost. It proves that the shiniest treasures in history are rarely the most valuable. The real riches and the real debts are found in the societies they create and destroy.